Far away in the deep stars, there was a planet called Zovarn. Zovarn was not like Earth. Its skies were green, and the ground was silver, and the buildings were shaped like tall crystals. The people of Zovarn were peaceful and smart, and they loved to learn about other worlds. They called themselves Zovara. Zaran was a young Zovari girl who always wanted to visit other planets, was curious and brave, and always asked questions that made her teachers nervous. One day, she got a message from the High Council of Zovarn, was selected for a mission to study a strange planet called Earth. Zareen was excited, and her eyes were full of light. She went to the Grand Library to prepare for her mission. Library was huge and full of glowing books and floating memory crystals. She touched one crystal, and it opened with a soft sound like a whisper. Crystal showed her old files and records about Earth, but one file had a red glow and a warning sign. It said Forbidden. Zareen looked around and no one was watching, so she opened the file. The words inside made her freeze. It said, "Human males eat their females." She blinked and read it again and again and again. It was clear and simple and terrifying. The file had some pictures too, a human male and a female sitting close, and then a picture of food and the words "I will eat you" written in big letters. Zareen's hands shook and she dropped the crystal. She picked it up again and saved the file in her pocket. Crystal. She ran out of the library with her heart beating fast. She reached the council hall where the other researchers were waiting. Grand Elder of Zovarn was speaking. He said Earth was a level 2 threat. He said they were still trying to understand human culture. Zareen stepped forward and asked if the files about human males were truth. Elder looked at her with sad eyes. He said, "We do not speak of that." Zareen asked again and again until the elder said, "The truth is unknown but dangerous." She asked then, "Why are we going?" The elder said, "Because knowing the truth is more important than fear." Zareen nodded, but inside her mind was full of strange thoughts. She imagined herself on Earth. She imagined seeing human males and trying not to be eaten, but she was not going to back away now. She was chosen, and she was ready. Later that night, she sat near her crystal pod and looked at the stars. She held the pocket crystal close to her chest. She whispered, "I will find out the truth, no matter what happens." The next morning, her ship was ready. It was small and fast and made of silver light. Zareen stepped inside and waved goodbye to her people. Ship flew high into the sky and then into space as stars passed by her window. She thought about the file again. She played the words in her head. Human males eat their females. Was it a mistake? Was it real? Was it just a misunderstanding? She remembered her teacher once said, "Sometimes aliens do not understand human jokes." But what kind of joke is that? She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The ship spoke to her in a soft voice. Destination Earth. In 6 light hours. She opened her eyes and looked ahead. Blue and white and spinning slowly in the dark. There was Earth, a beautiful and dangerous world. She whispered to herself again, "I will not be afraid. I am Zarin of Zovarn, and I will find the truth." As the ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Zarin held the pocket crystal tight. Below her were cities and oceans and lights and people. She did not know what would happen next, but one thing was sure. This mission was not just about study, it was about survival, because if the file was right, then humans were more terrifying than anyone ever imagined, and Zarin was now in their world. The ship moved like a quiet shadow across the sky of Earth. Zareen looked outside and saw clouds floating like cotton rivers, and cities glowing below like stars trapped on the ground. She had never seen anything like it before, and her heart was a mix of wonder and warning. The message from the Forbiddens file still echoed inside her head again and again. Human males eat their females. She kept repeating it like a shield in her mind. Eat their females, eat their females. Her ship landed in a quiet place near the edge of a human park surrounded by tall green trees and a silver lake that shimmered in the soft light of the early morning sun. Zareen stepped out slowly, her skin glowing softly under her invisibility shield. She did not want to be seen, not yet, not until she understood more. She carried her translator device and her pocket crystal and walked toward the sound of voices. There were humans nearby, and Zarin followed the sound with quiet steps and wide eyes. She hid behind a tree and saw a male and a female sitting together on a bench. The male was tall with dark hair and a strange soft beard, and he was laughing. The female was smiling and holding a cup of warm liquid, and her hair moved in the wind like the leaves of Zavarn's flame trees. They looked happy and safe and normal, but Zarian knew better. She watched with fear as the male leaned closer and whispered something to the female. Then he said words that made Zarin's skin crawl. "You look so good I could eat you." Female laughed and touched his arm and said, "I dare you." Zarin's hands began to shake and her breathing became heavy, and her translator repeated the words again and again. "I could eat you, I dare you." She believed it now more than ever. Warning was real. She looked around and saw a bag near the bench, and inside it was wrapped food. She saw them open it and begin to eat and laugh and feed each other. But Zarin did not see love or joy. She saw hunting and danger, and the first step before the act. She could not wait any longer. She had to stop it. She had to save. The female Zarin reached into her satchel and pulled out a small glowing orbit. Was a pause sphere, a device made by the Zovari to freeze moments in emergency time. She had only one. She pressed it, and the world around her slowed, like thick liquid birds stopped mid-flight, and leaves froze in the air, and sound vanished like it never existed. Only Zarin could move now. She ran to the bench and looked at the frozen humans. Female had a half-eaten sandwich in her hand, and her mouth was open in a silent laugh. The male had his arm halfway to her shoulder, and his eyes were full of something Zarin could not understand. She looked closer and closer, trying to see the danger, trying to find teeth or claws or poison, but there was none. Still, she was sure something terrible was about to happen. She pulled out her translator and aimed it at the male's face and said in the clearest Zovari tone, "Do not eat her. She is not food. She is not meat. She is not a snack." The translator blinked confused, and then repeated her words in soft English that bounced off the frozen silences. Zarin turned to the female and touched her forehead gently. "You are safe now. I will protect you. I will stop the danger." She stepped back and touched the orb again. The world returned to motion like water rushing through a broken dam. Birds flew again. Wind whispered again. Voices returned to the humans. Looked confused. The male blinked and looked around and said, "What just happened?" The female stood up and looked at her drink and said, "Did you feel that Zarin forgot her invisibility?" The male saw her. He stared. She stared back, frozen with fear. He said, "Who are you?" Zarin raised her hand slowly and said in broken English, "I save youth." Male frowned and took a step forward. "Save me from what?" Zarin pointed at him and said, "From you, from your eating, from your plan." The female laughed a little and said, "Wait, is she serious?" Zarin did not laugh. She said, "I read your files. It is known males eat females here. It is truth." The male shook his head and smiled like she had said something funny. He said, "No, that is just a saying, a joke. It means you like someone a lot. It does not mean real eating." Zarin felt her world tilt. Her heart sank and her head felt heavy. "A joke," she whispered. The male nodded and said, "Yes, we say weird things, but we do not mean them like that." Zarin stood still, her mind breaking and rebuilding piece by piece. She looked at the female and asked, "So you are not in danger?" The female said, "Only from his cooking." They both laughed. Zarin did not. She sat down on the grass and stared at the sky. Maybe the file was wrong. Maybe it was just fear written long ago. But fear had brought her here, and now it had met truth, and truth was even stranger than fear. Zarin sat on the grass, still thinking, still spinning the words in her mind like stars caught in a storm. She was not used to jokes that sounded like threats, not used to a language that said one thing and meant another. On Zavarn, words were truth, and meaning was fixed like crystal walls that never moved. But here on earth words danced like shadows and truth was wrapped in riddles. Human male sat beside her and said his name was Daniel, and the female was Mira, and they meant no harm, and they laughed because laughter made strange things feel soft. Zarin listened, but her eyes kept checking for danger, her hands holding her pocket crystal like a shield. Daniel said they were going to a dinner party later, and he asked Zarin if she wanted to come along and see more humans in their natural spaces. Irene paused and then agreed because she wanted to learn and also because she still did not fully trust the meaning of their words. The three of them walked through the park and into the streets, full of lights and smells and sounds that wrapped around Zarin like waves on an alien shore. Mira smiled and gave Zarin a flower, but Zarin scanned it first with her wrist chip and only held it when it showed no poison. Daniel said she was funny and careful, and Zarin did not know if that was praise or warning. They reached the house where the dinner was happening, and the lights were soft and music floated in the air like feathers. Inside were many humans, all smiling, all talking, all moving in patterns that Zarin tried to understand, but could not map. A large table was in the center with food laid out like a ritual, and Zarin watched every hand, every motion, every glance. Someone said, "We are just waiting for one more dish." And Daniel said, "I will help," in the kitchen, and left the room. Zarine's eyes followed him, and her heart thumped like thunder in a crystal cave. Mira was talking to friends, and Zarin stayed close because her mission was to protect the female and watch the male. In the kitchen, Daniel was cutting something, and the smell was strong, and the knife moved quickly in his hand. Zarine activated her invisible shield and slipped inside. Unseeing and silent, she saw red liquid on the board and strange soft shapes in a bowl, and the fire making hissing sounds that reminded her of Zovarn's warning sirens. Hummed a tune and muttered something like, "Hope she likes it spicy." Zarine's mind exploded with fear because the Forbidden's file had mentioned spices used to hide taste, and the act of softening meat with heather. Breath became short and sharp, and she touched the emergency trigger on her wrist. She could not let it happen, not here, not again, not while she could stop it. She jumped forward, turned off her invisibility, and grabbed Daniel's arm and shouted loud enough to freeze the air, "Do not cook her." Daniel dropped the knife and stared at her and said, "What are you doing?" Zarine pointed at the bowl and said, "You are preparing her. You are using the heat. You are following the file." Daniel laughed, but it sounded nervous, and said, "This is just chicken, not Mira." "What are you talking about?" Zarine blinked and looked again and scanned the bowl, and the scanner said non-human organic substance, safe for Earth consumption. Her hands shook and her voice broke as she asked, "Then what does cook her mean?" Daniel put the knife down and said, "It means to make food for her, not to turn her into food. It is another Earth saying." Zod on the floor of the kitchen and whispered again and again, "Cook her means to feed, not to consume." Daniel offered her water and said, "Maybe we need to get you used to Earth. Talk before you join dinner again." Zarine drank the water and nodded, but inside her thoughts were flying like wild birds with no sky. Later, they returned to the dinner table and the food was served, and everyone cheered and clapped and shared plates and stories and laughter. Zarine watched and waited and slowly began to eat small bites after scanning everything twice, and Mira smiled and said, "Welcome to Earth." Daniel laughed and added, "Just don't take us too literal." Zarine nodded slowly and said, "I am learning your meanings, your ways, your double words." Everyone laughed again and raised their glasses, and the moment felt safe and light like floating on soft gravity. But inside her pocket crystal, the Forbidden's file glowed again, faintly, like it still had something left to say. Zarine looked at it once more and wondered if there were deeper meanings still hidden, still waiting to be found, still dangerous, because Earth was full of words and smiles and masks and maybe even deeper truths no one had yet uncovered, and her mission was far from over. The next morning, sunlight painted the room with golden lines, and soft warmth touched Zarine's face like a quiet welcome. She opened her eyes slowly, still thinking about the dinner and the humans and their strange smiling faces and stranger words. Earth was nothing like she had imagined. It was louder and brighter and full of meanings hiding behind other meanings. She sat up in the small guest room where Mira had offered her rest and reached for her translator device. It blinked with a quiet glow and showed her messages from the Zovari High Council asking for updates and observations and any signs of danger. Zarine hesitated. She wanted to tell them she was safe, but her mind was still a puzzle with pieces that did not fit. She had not yet solved the mystery of the Forbidden's file. She had not yet unlocked the full truth behind the words, eat, cook, love, feed all. These words sounded simple, but held layers and shadows. Mira knocked on the door and asked if she was ready for breakfast, and Zarin replied yes with a voice still wrapped in questions. They sat together at the kitchen table, and Daniel poured a drink he called juice, and Mira offered Zarin a thing called toast. Zarin scanned the food and found it safe, and took a bite and tried to smile like the humans did. Daniel laughed and said, "Looks like you are starting to enjoy human food." And Zarin nodded slowly and said, "I am beginning to understand the purpose of eating. That does not include fear." They laughed again, and Mira asked her what food was like on Zavarn, and Zarin described crystal fruits and steam herbs and energy dust collected from the moon lakes. They listened with wide eyes, and Mira said, "That sounds beautiful," and Daniel said, "That sounds like something from science fiction," and Zarin did not understand the joke. After breakfast, Daniel offered to teach her more Earth language using something he called entertainment. Called it a movie. They sat together in the living room and turned on a flat glowing screen, and voices and images filled the space. Movie was about humans in love and humans in trouble, and humans saying many things that made no logical sense. Zarin watched with deep focus and wrote down every strange phrase. She paused the movie and looked at Daniel and asked, "Why did he say he wants to eat her up?" Daniel smiled and said, "It means he finds her very attractive and adorable." And Zarin blinked slowly and asked, "But why say eat?" Daniel shrugged and said, "Because it is funny and sweet and strange. And that is how we Zarin wrote in her notes, humans use food words for feelings." She resumed the movie. A scene came where a human said, "He is toast," and Zarin paused again and asked, "Does that mean he will be eaten?" And Daniel laughed and said, "No, it means he is in trouble, or finished or doomed." And Zarin looked more confused than before. She said, "But toast is bread," and Daniel nodded and said, "Yes, but it also means something else depending on the mood and the tone." And the moment Zarin felt her brain heat up with confusion and data, she asked the translator to process language, patterns, and emotional context, and the translator replied, "Error, too many contradictions." Brought popcorn and said, "This is for fun, not for study. Just relax and enjoy." And Zarin tried, but her mind kept collecting every strange phrase and storing it for later analysis. When the movie ended, Zarin looked at her notebook, and it was full of words that all meant more than one thing. She sighed and said, "I need a better way to learn." And Daniel said, "We can show you real conversations with real people." So they took her outside into the city full of humans, speaking, laughing, shouting, singing, whispering. Every voice carried layers. Every sentence had hidden corners. They sat at a cafe and watched people talk and eat, and Zarin listened carefully. One woman said, "I could just eat him up," and another said, "He is such a snack," and someone else said, "That dish was to die for." Zarin looked at Mira and asked, "Do they love each other or want to consume each other?" Mira smiled and said, "Sometimes it is both, but mostly it is just talk." Daniel said, "Humans like to mix feelings and food. It makes everything more exciting." And Zarin nodded slowly, trying to accept this odd reality. She looked around at humans eating together, laughing together, looking at each other with eyes full of meaning. She thought of her own people, where meals were silent and clean, and love was shared through energy pulses and memory crystals. Here on Earth, food was a language, and love was a menu, and every smile could mean 10 different things. That night she sat alone and recorded her findings into her mission log. She spoke clearly. Humans do not eat each other in the physical sense, but they speak as if they do. This may cause confusion to other species. Recommend cultural language filter before contact. She closed the log and looked out the window at the stars hiding behind clouds and thought, maybe Earth was not dangerous, just different, and maybe understanding would not come from warnings, but from watching and listening and tasting one word at a time. Zarin stood on the rooftop of Mira's house while night wrapped the earth in soft darkness, and the stars whispered above like old friends calling her name across space. She held the pocket crystal in her hand, its light pulsing with gentle blue waves like a heartbeat from Zavarn, reminding her she was still part of something greater, still on a mission that had not yet ended. She had seen smiles and food and laughter and strange words, and still her mind asked the same question again and again. Why was the Forbidden File created in the first place? Why did the Zavari warn so strongly about human males, if all of it was just misunderstanding and playful phrases and sweet confusion? She needed answers more than ever. That night when the house was quiet and Mira and Daniel were asleep, Zarin connected her crystal to the ship's secure link and sent a private message to the Grand Library. She requested access to the ancient records hidden behind layers of security and silence her. Clearance was high now after direct Earth contact, and the system opened for her like a slow-blooming flower of truth inside. She found the original data, the first mission log from a scout called Luro, sent to Earth 100 Earth years ago. Luro had come alone, without a team, without backup, without a translator, and what he saw was recorded in shaky code and broken signals. Zarin watched the log and saw Luro land near an old human city where language was rough and behavior was wild, and culture was still growing its branches. She watched him observe a group of humans, speaking loud and using strange words that matched the file warnings. She watched him misunderstand them one by one. A man telling a woman, "I will eat you alive." A group laughing over roasted meat, calling it Hira. Couple whispering, "Let's cook together tonight." Zarin saw how Luro panicked, how he ran from shadows, how he recorded every word as a danger sign, how he never stayed long enough to understand the second meaning behind the first. Luro's log ended with one final entry: "I fear the males on this planet, for they speak of hunger with love and treat affection like prey." Zarin paused the log and sat still, her thoughts stretching across time and stars. She finally understood. Luro was not wrong, but he was not right either. Came at the wrong time, without tools, without help, and left before the truth could unfold. Forbidden's File was born from fear, not fact, and yet it shaped how generations of Zavari saw Earth. She knew now what she had to do. She had to rewrite the record with full truth and full context and full clarity. But she also wondered, why was the file never corrected? Why did no one return to verify the truth in all these years? As she searched deeper, she found a hidden message buried under the log, locked in a council-only archive. The message was from Elder Zealer, once head of the mission board. It read in clear tone, "We do not risk second contact for fear truth may be worse than belief." Zarin's heart grew heavy. They were afraid that the file might be correct, or even darker than imagined, so they chose silence over knowledge. She stood up and looked at the sky again, the stars now sharper, like eyes watching. The truth was never dangerous, only the fear of it was in the morning. She shared none of this with Daniel or Myra, not yet, not until she was ready to explain it with care. Instead, they took her to a science center where she saw young humans learning about planets and stars and languages of the universe. She smiled quietly, knowing some of those children might one day meet her people in peace later. Daniel handed her a small gift, a notebook filled with Earth sayings and their meanings drawn with pictures and colors. He said, "Maybe this will help you speak Earth the crazy way we." Zarin laughed gently and said, "I am learning one layer at a time." She opened the book and saw the phrase, "You are the apple of my eye." She raised an eyebrow and said, "I hope this does not mean I must eat someone's eye." They all laughed again, and Mira said, "No, it means someone loves you very much." Zarin nodded and whispered strange, beautiful, terrifying language. That night she sent a new log to the High Council. She did not hide behind fear or caution. She said the Forbidden File must be renamed. She said Earth is not a world of monsters, but a world of mystery wrapped in metaphors. She said if love sounds like hunger here, it is not because of danger, but because of deep emotion tied with taste and time and trust. She ended the message with her new title, "Humans speak in flavors, and some flavors take time to understand." Zarin moved through the city streets with quiet steps, her cloak wrapped around her, and her scanner hidden in her palm. She had spent many days learning Earth's ways, eating Earth food, speaking Earth words, smiling Earth smiles. But still her mission was not over, and her report was not complete, because understanding was not just about watching, it was about feeling what they feel. And seeing what they hide, she walked past tall buildings and glowing signs, past humans talking and laughing, past a street singer singing about broken hearts and lost time. Everything looked normal, everything felt peaceful, but her instincts whispered that something was coming. She crossed a small alley and felt a sudden pulse from her scanner warning. Alert, unknown signal tracking wave detected. Before she could react, a bright net of blue light dropped from above and wrapped around her like a cage made of thunder. Zareen fell to her knees as her translator sputtered, and her invisibility flickered, and her thoughts spun like stars caught in a storm. Voices shouted from the shadows, and men in uniforms rushed toward her holding devices and shouting codes she did not understand. She tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to say, "I come in peace. I am only here to learn," but the net blocked her signal and her voice came out broken like static over cold wind. They pulled her into a black vehicle and drove fast through streets that blurred into one long line of confusion. Inside the vehicle, a human female in dark glasses asked her questions with a calm voice that felt like ice on skin. "Where are you from? What are you doing here? How many others are with you? What do you want from us?" Zareen stayed silent because her translator was jammed and her mind was still trying to catch up with what had just happened. They took her to a large building underground and placed her in a clear room with smooth white walls and blinking lights. She sat in the middle, breathing slowly, trying to stay calm, trying to listen to every word said through the glass. She heard the words alien, possible threat, biological, unknown, must inform higher authority. She closed her eyes and reached into her pocket crystal, hoping her emergency beacon was still active back on Devour. Her signal would now be flashing red across the sky, alerting the council that something had gone wrong, that she had been taken, that Earth was no longer safe. But she knew they might not come, not quickly, not quietly, not without questions. Door opened and a new human entered, not in uniform, not carrying weapons, just holding a small tablet and wearing a soft smile. He said his name was Dr. Elias, and he was not here to hurt her. He just wanted to talk. Zareen looked into his eyes and saw something strange, something calm, something curious. Sat down across from her and began to speak in short, clear words. "I think you understand. You think you are not here to attack. I think you are scared and confused like we are." Zareen touched her translator and it sparked back to life, and she whispered, "I am Zarin of Devour. I came to learn, not to harm." Elias smiled wider and said, "Good, because we have much to learn too, and fear makes mistakes happen." Zareen asked, "Why did your people capture me if they wanted peace?" Elias replied, "Not everyone understands peace. Not everyone sees learning as safety. Some see different, as danger. Some fear what they cannot name." Zareen nodded slowly and said, "My people were the same once they hid the truth. Instead of facing it, they chose silence over understanding." Elias said, "That is the story of many worlds." They talked for hours about words and meanings, about food and fear, about history and hope. Zareen told him about the Forbiddens File and Luro's report, and how her people believed Earth was a world where males consumed their mates. Elias laughed softly and said, "I suppose if I read your language the wrong way, I would be scared too." He said, "We call things sweet when they are kind. We say delicious when we mean beautiful. We mix love and taste because both make life better." Zareen listened and wrote it all in her mind like music she was hearing. For the first time later, Elias spoke to the others in the room and convinced them to release her under watch, under care, under trust. Zareen stepped out of the white room and breathed deep. For the first time in hours, she looked at the humans, now not just as subjects of study, but as mirrors of her own kind, confused, curious, cautious. She returned to Mira and Daniel, who had been searching for her and worrying and hoping. They hugged her like family and asked 1,000 questions, and Zareen just said, "I am fine, I am learning still, and there is more to understand." That night she stood again under the stars, her eyes full of questions, and her heart full of something new. She had been captured, but she was not broken. She had been confused, but she was not lost. She was still learning and still believing, because truth was bigger than fear, and peace was stronger than silence, and she was not done yet. The sky above Earth was quiet and wide, with soft clouds floating like forgotten memories, and the air carried the smell of flowers and warm bread, and something unspoken that hung between all living things. Zareen stood by the window of the small home where Myra and Daniel now lived as her closest contacts and possibly her first true human friends, and she looked out at the streets where children ran and people talked, and no one knew that one of the watchers from the stars was still among them. Days had passed since her capture and release, since the long talk with Dr. Elias, since her message to the High Council that Earth was not a world of monsters, but a place of mixed meanings and layered truths. She had been waiting for a response. Unsure if they would believe her, unsure if they would understand what she now knew with both mind and feeling, that humans were not easy to explain, and maybe that was the point. The pocket crystal on her wrist blinked once with a soft green light, and the signal was clear. The council had accepted her report and marked her mission as complete, and offered her return at any time with honor and gratitude. But Zareen did not move. She did not pack. She did not send the return command to her ship, hidden far outside the city under holographic cover. Instead, she walked outside and let the sunlight touch her skin and the wind carry her breath, as if Earth itself was asking her to stay a little longer. She found Mira at the cafe reading a book full of strange words and even stranger pictures, and Daniel was sketching a map of stars that had not yet been named. They looked up and smiled, and Zareen felt something deep and quiet shift inside her. She sat down and ordered a drink without scanning it first, and laughed when it tasted both sweet and bitter like Earth itself. Asked her what she would do next now that her mission was done, and Zareen paused before answering, because something in her heart was no longer the same as before. She said, "I think understanding is not something you finish. I think it grows like trees and changes like seasons and waits like stars." Said, "That sounds very human," and Zareen smiled without correcting her. Later that evening, they walked together to the edge of the city, where buildings gave way to fields and flowers, and the horizon stretched wide like the future itself. Zareen looked up at the sky and wondered if the stars would miss her, or if they already knew she was not coming back just yet. She thought of Luro, the first scout who ran too soon, and of Elias, the human who listened, and of Mira and Daniel, who never once saw her as a threat, only a guest, only a question waiting for its answer. She remembered the phrases that once confused her and now made her laugh, and she wrote a new line in her notebook: "Sometimes to eat someone up just means you never want to lose them." That night she sat on the rooftop again and spoke softly into her crystal log one final time, her voice clear and steady like the sea she had seen only once, but still remembered. Mission log entry: last planet Earth, subject classification updated, host species emotional and unpredictable, but capable of deep care and shared truth, language flexible and poetic, often confusing but rarely cruel, by intent, recommendation for future contact, approved with guidance for new scouts to study cultural metaphors before arrival. Summary complete. Personal note: do not fear the way they speak, listen to how they love her. Crystal blinked once, then faded. Its task complete, its record secure. She closed her eyes and felt peace settle into her bones. Like light falling into deep water in the morning, she walked through the streets as just another visitor from somewhere else, and no one stared, and no one chased, and no one feared. She watched a boy give a girl a flower and say, "You are my snack," and they both laughed and kissed, and the moment passed like a whisper. Zareen smiled and whispered back, "I understand now." Later, at the edge of the field, she looked toward the place where her ship was hidden, and for the first time did not feel the pull to leave. She raised her hand to the stars and gave them thanks for sending her here, and not somewhere simpler, because this world, with all its mixed meanings and sharp laughter and edible compliments, was exactly what she needed to grow. She turned and walked back to the city, where Mira and Daniel waited with food and stories and smiles that meant more than they said. This time she was not there as a scout or a researcher or an alien. This time she was just Zareen Frendelbairn, something more, and somewhere in the stars the old files were being updated, and the warning that once said human males eat their females was being rewritten into something new, something true, something strange and beautiful. Yes, human males say they will eat their females, but not in the way the alien girl thought.